I'm delighted to announce our next panel discussion. The panel is titled Philanthropy's Role in Crisis, Responding to COVID-19 and Supporting Long-Term Recovery. The broad objective of this panel is to have our panelists reflect and provide their perspective on the role that philanthropy has played and continues to play in responding to the pandemic, and discuss some ways that we can sustain this momentum in the long run. I'm excited to introduce the panel for this session. We have Anand Deshpande joining us from India. Anand is a longtime Indiaspora member and founder, chairman, and managing director of Persistent Systems. We also have Anu Aga joining us from India. Anu is the former chairperson of Thermax and founder, trustee of Teach for India. Anand and Anu are both featured on our Philanthropy Leaders List. We also have Vikram Khanna joining us from Singapore. Vikram is the associate editor and economic affairs commentator at the Straits Times in Singapore, and one of our esteemed jurors who helped us with this list. And finally, to moderate this panel, we are delighted to have Abhishek Sharma, who is the CEO of Foundation Holdings. Abhishek is joining us from Dubai, and he is also one of our jurors who has offered us incredible support that has helped us put this list together. So welcome everyone. And Abhishek, let me turn this over to you.
Good morning from Dubai. Hopefully everyone's doing well. I had the privilege of going to the University of Pennsylvania, and the alma mater or the founder of that university is Benjamin Franklin. A quote he often had used was, "A man wrapped up in himself makes a very small bundle." Now, at that point, hopefully it edited it a man or woman, but hopefully the point is clear. It's my pleasure today to welcome Mrs. Anuaga, Mr. Anand, as well as Mr. Vikram. It really is an honor. The way to kick it off, I just have 3 rapid fire questions, if that's okay with everyone. What does philanthropy actually mean to each of you? How did you arrive at your philanthropic priorities? And when did you get serious about philanthropy? So if I could please turn it to Mrs. Anu, just to please kick this off.
To me, philanthropy is not just about giving money. It is about money, but it's also your skill and your time. It is relatively easy to write out a check. But I have seen that in Teach for India, the young graduates and professionals who are outstanding quality give 2 years of their time. And to me, that is also philanthropy, because later as alums, they change the landscape of social enterprise. Do you want me to go ahead with other answers, or wait?
Yes, please. Yes, Ms.
What made me take education as the sector? I was wanting to give at one stage and was looking for a credible NGO, and everyone pointed at Shaheen Mystery, and her enthusiasm rubbed on me and my daughter, and that's how we have taken education as a sector. And now we realize it's one of the most important sectors if India wants to develop and grow, along with health. And what was the third one?
Is there a moment, or when did you actually get serious about philanthropy?
It's a personal thing. My son, who died at a young age, was very keen that substantial part of our income should go towards philanthropy. And after his death, we started in a very serious way. And over time, it grew. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. If I could turn it to Mr. Anand, please.
Hi, thanks. First, I'm humbled and honored to be part of this list. And thank you, Indiaspora, for including me. I have been looking at philanthropy more as, something that we can make a difference. And the reason I do it is partly because it makes me feel good. More than the people who you give to, you do it for yourself. And that's what is very exciting. I've been doing, most of my personal philanthropy has been around helping entrepreneurship happen at the low end. So we work with a lot of urban services businesses, trying to help them to scale. So they're very small, 5 lakhs to 1 crore of businesses. And this is something we run through our family foundation called the Asra Foundation. And the idea is to make sure that small businesses succeed, because that's really where the action is. And that is the place where we can really make things happen. the whole principle behind that was that if every person in a family earns enough money to make sustainable long-term ongoing living, then all the other things they can afford to pay for and feel good about doing it. So that was the reason for going after that. We started about 7 years back, more along, and decided that a friend of mine, and we have been talking about this for a long time, about the point of, learn, earn, and return. And after I turned 50, I was sort of thinking about it, and I sort of couldn't figure out for 3 more years. And then, about 7 years back, I sort of decided that it was time to at least start this activity. Thankfully, things had a team, and things have gone well after that.
Thank you, Anand. If I could turn it just to Mr. Vikram, please. I believe,
yeah. Sorry. Well, thank you for including me in this program. I'm not in the league of some of the philanthropists, but nevertheless, I might have a few thoughts to share. As to the first question of what philanthropy means, I mean, it's a very good question, because I think philanthropy means different things to different people, and even to philanthropists themselves. So you have, for example, the Gates Foundation approach to philanthropy is to save as many lives at as low a dollar cost as possible. So that's why they support initiatives such as childhood immunization, malaria eradication, HIV, sanitation, and so on, which have a huge payoff in terms of lives saved at relatively low cost. Then you have George Soros, for example, who's a completely different approach. He believes that for the betterment of societies, you need to change political systems, root and branch. So that's why he's supported progressive movements in repressed countries in Eastern Europe, Myanmar, and so on. So, and other philanthropists have their pet causes, whether it's education, whether it's health, whether it's children, people with disabilities, etc., etc. From my own view is that philanthropy is basically about filling gaps, about doing things that the governments are not doing or not doing enough, and also creating institutions that are not created by the state. I think as Mr. Dhawan alluded. But effective philanthropy is not just about giving and being generous. It's also about professionalism. It's also about monitoring outcomes. It's about forging partnerships, ensuring transparency, and doing things that catalyze more giving. And I think these are what a lot of the foundations that Mr. Dhawan described. I think these are things that they have done. They have built, the philanthropic body has itself become an institution. So that's it, yeah. So that's, as for my own involvement, it's been limited. I do have a resort in Bali, in Indonesia, and we support children in the neighboring schools. So we adopt a child and see him through his entire education. And I sat on the board of Singapore's oldest arts center called the Substation, which is basically totally dependent on donations, both from government and private individuals. And my basic role was to go with a begging bowl in hand to corporations and donors to support this institution, to support the arts. So yeah, so that's my limited journey.
Thank you. That's helpful. So, I guess at least in this part of the world, we've been referring to COVID with the DC and AD lens, pre-COVID and post-COVID. So if I again turn it back to you, Mrs. Anu, just what have you felt with COVID in terms of the impact and the changes which are coming for philanthropy? Again, your own personal lens, but also in your cohort, how are people treating this, and that any guidance and any views would be welcome.
Sure. When COVID hit us first, we were in a dilemma. We support a certain set of NGOs. And should we sort of cut down on what we give to them and give to COVID? And then we realized that none of the NGOs, especially education, you can cut down. You have to increase, in fact. So it was give to your regular NGOs plus and give to the cause of COVID. And when we saw the images of the migrant workers during the first lockdown, we realized these are the people we haven't thought of for, and we need to reach out to them for basics like food. And so COVID opened our eyes to many areas where we were blind to. And I think we cannot forget these, and this will have to be a long-term giving for certain causes.
Thank you. Mr. Anand, please.
Yeah, I'd like to extend from what Anu said. And I think one of the things that I noticed during COVID, which was very encouraging in some sense, is that many givers, including individuals and companies, came together and thought of working their philanthropic donations together rather than doing our own individual, whatever we might be doing. And I was very encouraged at the support and the excitement that got created out of that. And Anu and I are both part of Pune, and the chamber was very active in some of these activities. And it was very heartening to see individuals, companies, and everyone else coming together with government to really channelize efforts to support the COVID cause in some sense. So we were not just donating on our own cause, but together as a platform. And I thought that impact was very good. And I believe that we should learn from this. And for some of the other things, creating a mission that includes many people, whether it's corporates, individuals, and all of us, and doing impact can really give us long-term returns and results. So I'm really excited about the experiment that got forced upon us because of COVID, but looking forward, this is something we should extend. Just on COVID further along, I think we are still not done on maybe the basic infrastructure for healthcare may have been a little bit better than what it is. But I think the biggest challenge that comes ahead is the livelihoods and the businesses that have suffered. I work very closely with very small businesses, and I can say that all of them are hurting very poorly. They have not had steady customers for many, many months now. And I think we really need to do something to rebuild these businesses, because that is the essential infrastructure for our country.
Mr. Vikram, any thoughts?
Yes, I mean, as tracking the crisis as a journalist, I think one of the things is this is a unique kind of crisis. It's not a national crisis. It's not even a series of national crises. It is actually a global crisis. So I think the most effective philanthropy really has been that which has a global dimension. So, for example, the efforts to expand vaccine production capacity across the world, the whole COVAX thing, I think that those have been very important in this crisis. As far as India and developing countries are concerned, I think the crisis has brought out the importance of primary healthcare systems. I think this has been very, very neglected in many of these countries. In India, for example, a lot of communities were left to their own devices. They had to depend on the local pharmacist or whatever it is to treat people. Of course, he didn't have the knowledge, or he didn't know what to do. And I think this is an underfunded area. It gets about half of what education gets. And I think this is a priority going forward. And also, I think Anu Agha had mentioned a lot of the people who fall between the cracks, the migrant workers, the people who we never think of, people in jails, for example, people with mental illness, for example. Mental illness was underfunded even before the COVID crisis. It's even worse now. And finally, I think COVID has highlighted the importance of supply chains. I think this is, the delivering critical items, all the critical items that are needed are part of complex supply chains, even the vaccines themselves. And I think any philanthropic effort has to come to grips with this issue. So I think one of the interesting things here in Singapore that we've observed is that a group of IIM alumni sort of pooled their supply chain expertise together. And they mapped all the global supply chains needed to procure essential items. And then they made partnerships with last mile partners in India and were able to do this. So I think this crisis has brought out the importance of mastering how the supply chain works in order to deliver help. So yeah, so that's what I've observed.
Thank you. Just taking a step back, Mr. Nanu, in terms of aspiring philanthropists, I guess really the youth of today, what advice would you have for some of the younger generation who are aspiring or looking forward to get really into philanthropy from your own journey? Any guidance, any advice for the futures?
Yeah, I would say, as Anand said, in giving, you receive far more. My life has been enriched when the children from Akanksha and Teach for India come to my place and I see things through their eyes, For example, when they came to my house, they said, this is a boot khana. This means such a big house, how can you live alone? And when you go to the house and you see a small place where 8 people are living, it hits you. So through their lens, you could see things. So I would tell the young people, get involved in a cause you enjoy doing something. First, try out different things to see where your passion is. Select that cause and go deep into it, and your life will definitely be enriched. That would be mine.
Thank you. Anand?
No, I agree with what Anu said, and I just reinforce what I mentioned in the previous question as well, that I think we can all make a difference if we all work together. And I think philanthropy and personal funds or companies putting in CSR money has certain benefits that we're not constrained by some of the other things that the governments may be constrained by. And we can take more ambitious and exciting projects or look at more exciting problems to solve in some way or the other. And I'm quite excited. I feel that this is a good opportunity for all of us to work together. And I think we can inspire other people. We can inspire each other to do more. And I'm very excited as I look forward.
Vikram?
Yeah, I mean, on inspiring young people, I think young people are not in a financial position to sort of be philanthropists themselves. So I think the journey for a young person should start with volunteerism. I mean, to volunteer for activities, or to even to invest their skills, whatever skills they have. I think it's striking in India that actually there are children as young as 10 years old who have deployed their skills to help others. I mean, there's people who set up routers and so on in schools to enable digital learning. There are the young people who created WhatsApp groups to provide information and data and connect people who need help with whatever government agencies exist and so on. So I think that those are the routes for young people to volunteer and to invest whatever skills they have.
Thank you. One last question I have for the panelists here. I recently watched, and maybe I was late to this, is Inside Bill's Brain, Decoding Bill Gates. There was a good documentary, right? And it shows the joys, but also the challenges of his own journey, whether it's public health or I think some of the public sanitation efforts. What came across is, of course, you need determination to keep going, often working with government. So the question here is for the panelists, what has been the single biggest challenge and how have you tackled it in your own philanthropic journey? And again, I'll start with Ms. Anu in this case.
Well, when I first got involved with the NGOs, I was a little immature and didn't know how to deal with the government because they didn't keep the commitments they made. They didn't turn up for meetings. Their way of working was so different from our professional way of working that I used to say working with government is a spiritual experience. Because if you don't have the patience, your blood pressure will go up and you will not be able to manage. But later, when I realized the constraints they have, the problems they face, I was more empathetic and learned to build on this relationship. Because if you want to scale up anything, no NGO can do by itself. You need government as a partner. So I have learned that the greatest challenge can become your asset if you know how to deal with them. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. Anand? Anand, I believe you're on mute.
Sorry. No, all of us have a lot of learning. We have been experimenting a lot at the Asra Foundation, and I wouldn't say it's been challenging. It's been interesting as well. But I think if I'm looking forward to working and seeing what Ashish is doing to learn how to do this a little better than what we are. Probably we are not very efficient in the way we are organized right now, but I would, I think we can do a lot more and a lot better looking ahead. And that's sometimes a cause of frustration and a challenge.
Thank you. Vikram?
Yeah, people in India are better placed to talk about this situation, but I think while a lot of philanthropic organizations have managed to work with NGOs, there are still a lot of challenges. I mean, India has a government that does not seem to be very NGO friendly. I mean, we have, this Foreign Contributions Regulation Act, this FCRA, which is quite a hurdle for a lot of NGOs. They have to get registered and so on. And a lot of them have had their registrations canceled. So I think you have to work around these kind of bureaucratic issues, especially for foreign funding. There's also restrictions on re-granting. So, for example, if if one NGO is registered, it can't re-grant it can't subcontract to another NGO, which is sometimes necessary, in India. So I think you really do need to revisit this FCRA Act. And meanwhile, there should be waivers for registrations, at least in times of crisis and so on. And I think the point was also mentioned earlier, the NGOs in India lack managerial capacity. They don't really monitor outcomes. Their boards, the people from corporate India do not sit on the boards of NGOs. They don't have that kind of capacity. So it's important to not just fund causes, but to fund the NGOs organizationally, to make sure they are resilient, that they have built some financial reserves, that they have some sort of organizational strength. I think that should also be a focus of philanthropy in order to sort of make the whole ecosystem work better.
Thank you. That's insightful. Well, at least the panel has been heartwarming to hear. It's been engaging. So I just want to thank each one of you for taking the time, and congratulations and good luck on the journey ahead.
Thank you so much, Abhishek. Great to hear you moderate this very inspiring panel with Anu, with Vikram and Anand. I want to thank every one of you who have been on this list as well, the initial 100 list.